So welcome everybody. This is the 20th of June and we are in this special forum organized by GMI, which is called Freedom, Speaking Out in Times of Global Injustice. I'm Roberto Perez Rocha from Transparency International, which is the global coalition of NGOs that fight corruption and promote transparency around the world. As we fight corruption, we try to promote, engage, and empower civil society. And of course, one of the most important vehicles for us to work on is through music and arts. While we may think that corruption is something that is not connected to arts and music in particular, we have found that people, especially from the younger generations, have seen as one of the best avenues to express the issues they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis through music. Today, as the title of the session says, we're going to be speaking with some really remarkable people that I'm very proud to be moderating. And we want to talk about freedom of expression and what does it mean to be speaking out in terms of global injustice. Now that we have the global crisis of the pandemic, there are many special challenges that people around the world are facing, and this is no exception for musicians and activists from around the world. We have seen how, I'm just going to throw some information to warm up the conversation, that according to Freedom Tracker from Center of Nonprofit Law in the USA, says that by today, because of the COVID crisis, something like 86 governments have issued emergency declarations, which strongly curtail freedom of expression, freedom of movement, so on and so forth. Out of those, 35 governments have taken measures to curb specifically freedom of expression in any way or form. In those numbers, there's an account of a total of 112 countries that have acted in one way or another to restrict freedom of assembly. Of course, we have the issue of social distancing, but it has been seen that it's used as an excuse to actually curtail freedom of assembly for any matter that is not just, social gatherings, which is quite a worrying trend, because what we have seen before is that emergency measures in countries where democracies are very weak and where corruption is very rampant, they tend to stay for the long term. So the people at government, the people at power use this opportunity to put some stringent measures against civil society. And then, of course, they are not going to be taken down afterwards when the crisis is over. So thank you once again, Julie, Srirak, Lane. I'm going to introduce you very briefly to the audience. Srirak Plipat, he is Executive Director of Free Muse. You may explain a bit more what you do, Srirak, and what does Free Muse does. Julie Trebeau, I hope I pronounce it properly. She is the Director of Artists at Risk Connection, aka PEN. And Lane Herringman, it's difficult to actually pin down who you are and what you do, because you're a very multifaceted and multi-talented guy. But he is one of the founders of the group Raining Sahara. And perhaps you can also tell us much more of the things that you do. So thank you very much. Why don't we follow a little bit of the conversation that I have just started, and maybe you would like, after telling us, in rounds of one-on-one what you do, already go into telling the audience what are the particular challenges that you are seeing and facing in your work, given the pandemic and the general climate that we have in the world today. Ladies first, Julie, maybe you want to start?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to celebrate this Fête de la Musique with GMI and all of you. So I'm Julie Trebeau. I'm the Artist at Risk Connection Director here at PEN America, PEN America being the American Center for PEN International, the writers organization. So what do we do? We safeguard the right of artistic freedom of expression and ensure that artists and cultural professionals can everywhere live and work without fear. So how we do that? We kind of we address the need of artists at risk and the organization that can serve them. So we connect persecuted artists to a growing global network of resources. We facilitate cooperation among human rights organizations and art organizations. We do amplify stories of and the work of persecuted artists, and we raise visibility of the whole field of artistic freedom. So we do serve all disciplines, like artists from all disciplines, as well as cultural professionals. We're very inclusive in our kind of way to see artists. It's like really anyone work on a creative field or medium. So it includes visual artists, musicians, cartoonists, performer, but also writers and dancers. And since the launch of this project in 2017, we have assisted over 250 individual artists from over 50 countries. We connect them with a wide range of resources, but most frequently, what really they do need when they are persecuted is emergency fund, legal assistance, temporary relocation, and fellowship. So since the launch and with a core network of 70 partners, we over 50% of them have received direct support. So just also for the musician that we are talking to today, we have seen an increased number of musicians attacked around the world. And definitely the COVID-19 crisis with, you know, the emergency power you mentioned are really also made, you know, artists as a really clear target for authoritarian regime. So this is more than ever important to raise visibility about, you know, the work of artists, how musicians also is paying a large tribute of those attacks, being so also visible. You know, being on stage is making them a very easy target. And I can go further, but I want to give also the opportunity to my colleagues to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. That's an amazing work that you guys are doing. And very quickly, I mean, we had to actually take some action with one of our artists in 2018 because he could not return to his country. We'll talk about that a bit later. But Srirak, please tell us more about yourself and the organization that you work with.
Thank you, Roberto, and thanks, GMI also. It's a pleasure to join you at this important session. Freemuse is an international independent human rights organization. We focus on freedom of artistic expression. Freemuse documents violation of artistic freedom in 93 countries. So every year we publish the State of Artistic Freedom report, which is widely used by UN and government officials, as well as active actors in the field. Whenever there's censorship or arrest of artists, detain of artists, online and offline, then we have a team that monitor these cases. We certainly will verify those cases, make sure that they are actually a violation of artistic freedom based on international law. Then we publish this, this monitoring and research. We work with the UN system from special procedures, UN special rapporteurs, where we call for support on particular artists at risk whenever they are. So that's some of the research and advocacy work. We also work on the UPR, as well as the general human rights, the national governments that we also advocate directly, asking for release of artists imprisoned, or if, at the moment when they are currently being detained or prosecuted, then we provide support. We also do emergency support when it comes to life-threatening, or when people, artists at risk, need emergency support. Then we work with like other organizations, our partners, if they need residential or relocation organization like Julie, some of those that we work with. also to make sure that artists can be relocated from country they are at risk to be in a safe place. And small funds that we provide to artists in need. We also do campaigns trying to address individual artists at risk, as well as trying to address structural changes and focus particularly on artists from minority background, women artists, LGBTI expressions, which seems to be a target for being silenced, especially at the growth of nationalism worldwide, and some of these group minorities or the others become target for being silenced. So those are some of the main work we do. We certainly support national network at the moment. FreeMuse started the Global Action Network for Artistic Freedom, where we're trying to pull together National Artistic Freedom Network. So that consists of artists and arts organization at the national level. So we pull them up to be a part of a global movement. And that's one of the challenges that we've seen in the past when, unlike journalists, where they get together very well, they connect very well, artists seem to be individualistic and not very good at organizing themselves. So that's what we're trying to come in and help facilitate, bring human rights-based approach, make sure they know their rights, make sure they can help organize themselves and make their voice heard. We have a team working in Brussels for EU advocacy, going to the EU Parliament, make sure some of this normative process has been supporting artists also. During coronavirus period, this is certainly, we set up a team to look at this in particular. We're going to be launching a briefing on the impact of coronavirus on artistic freedom overall. We'll be organizing a meeting in Brussels, actually, next week also, to look at what's the impact of COVID-19 on the broader arts and culture sector overall. But we want to look not only the economic effect when cancellations of performances and concerts, but looking at what you mentioned, Roberto, at first, when now the world is growing nationalism through coronavirus, and that closed border cancellation of the right to assembly is also affect how artists, cartoonists especially, become a target when they start to criticize government about how they deal with the pandemic through cartoons and other forms, art form, then they are also subject to silencing. So those are some of the things that we are working on at the moment.
Thank you so much, Chirag. Before going to you, Lane, I just want to throw a quick question to Julie and to Chirag. How do people can actually contact you when they're in danger?
How do they contact me for?
I mean, both of your organizations. I mean, how's the mechanism to contact you? Is a question for you or for Julie?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, FreeMuse website. So that's freemuse.org, and you can do freemuse@freemuse.org. I think my name is probably will be on the list of the publication of the organizer. So yeah, very welcome. Have a look at our website. As, we make it very easy to access us.
For you, Julie?
It's pretty much in the same way than Chirag. We do have the website, so it's artistatriskconnection.org, and there is an encrypted form where the artist, can contact us, and we will connect them with the resource they need, and we are closely working with FreeMuse and many other organizations in the field. So the best way is through the website, as it's very secure. And also we have an email, which is arc@pen.org. So that's the way to contact us.
Right. I mean, this is really important for the audience who is watching us now, because not only, I mean, you can take note of this very important information, but also, I mean, help them and help also propagate the work of these organizations and how people can reach them, how can artists reach them. Because, you guys are there, and what it needs to be to kind of have this bridge so that, the voices, everybody knows about it. So thanks a lot. So, Lane.
Well, great to be here, and greetings from Northeast India. I am very close to Bhutan, China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, part of India. And I am part of this activist band called Rain in Sahara, which we put together a couple years ago. And basically, I have a background in classical music. So it's about combining this classical music background with then Roberto and I actually studied at the same institute in the London School of Economics. So I'm also I have an academic development background. So it was a way of figuring out how to utilize these two skills to basically utilize and leverage the power of music, activism, and technology through this project to tackle climate change and of course corruption. We're really lucky to be able to work with partners such as Transparency International on the anti-corruption side, and then on the climate change front with Extinction Rebellion and Fridays for Future. So in terms of some of the biggest challenges that we're currently facing, I mean, we've been in one of the most extreme lockdowns in the world, I think, here in India. And unfortunately, the situation isn't really improving that much, even though things have been released somewhat. A lot of us are still kind of locking down because we have community transmission, and a lot of cases, cases keep spiking and creating records every single day. So in terms of actually getting together, creating music, obviously live concerts that's taken away basically our main revenue stream. So in terms of figuring out alternative methods to survive, we're also just sort of trying to figure out the technology, how we can work remotely and keep up our workflow and content coming out. Those have been sort of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure there are probably a lot of other artists in our space who are facing similar challenges. So perhaps something that I think Matt at JMI was already talking about, some kind of system where we can share ideas and figure out ways to support each other and just share our lessons learned to enhance our impact and our ability to get our messages out there.
Well, thanks a lot. This is where we are in terms of the introduction about what each of us do and what are the immediate challenges that we are facing through our work in regards to the pandemic and in general terms. This is a tricky question, the one that I'm going to throw right now to you guys. And of course, I mean, keeping all anonymity and in place. But have you, or do you have any kind of a recent experiences of artists being targeted during this period that you could tell us? You know, we would like to see and illustrate, I mean, what exactly does that targeting look like? So that it is kind of as common as before, and you're seeing kind of a more an increase in terms of violence, or any other increases in terms of impunity of the attacks, given the rise of you know, these authoritarian rules because of the pandemic. I don't know if Julie, Srirak, also you, Lane, have any recent experiences. Again, without telling any details, but understanding, I mean, whether this phenomena is changing one way or the other. Maybe Julia, you want to start?
Maybe I can start. Yes, definitely. I think artists are really facing increasing risk of crackdown, and especially under disinformation laws during COVID-19 pandemic. Like artwork that engage with the health crisis, you know, can be prosecuted for spread false information, and that information criticize authoritarian regime responses to the virus or failures in their response. And we have seen numerous cases where artists were speaking out, you know, about the government management of the crisis and got immediately targeted. We have a few cases that has been public. A street artist in Myanmar has been attacked. Another group named Delight Lab, who are in Chile, they actually put on a very huge building in Santiago a light installation where they screen the word hambre. We say angst and in English, and so they got immediately targeted by the government and censor. So this is what we are witnessing. And also, as COVID-19 spread, we're also seeing artists who are currently in jail or also are facing a very, very difficult time. One of the case we have been kind of working with numerous organizations the past months was around the death of Shadi Abash. Shadi Abash was an Egyptian filmmaker. He was 24 years old when he died in prison after 2 years of unjust detention for directing a music video. The music video is in Bala, is by exiled musician Rami Essam. Rami is known as the voice of the Arab Spring and now live in exile. So really we are seeing that, you know, art is becoming really even more in danger as COVID-19 spreads. And also, I think I don't want also to kind of dismiss the financial risk. You know, as Lane was mentioning, you know, I feel that artists is paying a really large tribute, you know, on the kind of, you know, being economically like attached, and they lost massively their job. I mean, I'm talking also from kind of a US perspective, where funding is most of the art and culture funding are coming from the private sector. So we have seen a large number of artists out of job, and a lot of organization enabling new emergency fund for artists in distress, in finance distress. So this is also very important to highlight. A research last week got out from the US that artists are considered by the community, by all of us, as an essential worker. So
yeah, I'm gonna get to that point a bit later on, because that's a fundamental element of our conversation. Sirach, I don't know if you can also relate about you know, the recent experiences and how the pandemic and this you know, sort of a rising authoritarianism and whatnot are affecting artists around the world.
Yes, no, thank you for these questions. I think I would answer this one maybe by putting us back into context a little bit. Before the pandemic, we certainly have seen a growth of nationalism, populism politics around the world, where key leaders around the world has taken on this some religious and fundamentalist ideas, whether it's in India or Brazil, where the worlds are growing toward the right, with growth of far right groups and nationalism politics getting to the main media and challenge. And that has been the backdrop before the pandemic. When Freemuse documented and examined 700 cases in 93 countries, that's become a broader trend of how this growth of nationalism has brought a higher level of censorship, as well as prosecution, detention, and imprisonment of artists, and put artists at risk because of the new legitimacy to silence artists when artists started to express and deliver some narrative that doesn't fit with the nationalism politics. A classic example at this backdrop is certainly Hungary, when the Prime Minister received additional power unlimitedly in the name of fighting coronavirus, and those power, this authority, are being used to suppress any dissent. That happened before. So any political oppositions to the Orban regime before the pandemic was in even bigger trouble because of the additional authority being given. So that's how I think it's good to put this into perspective. And this is not only the Hungary case. We have seen cases of 7 artists being arrested in Belarus, for example, for spreading false information against government. And these are some of those that has been targeted by governments before, and not only this pandemic. The classical case of spreading fake news or misleading information that's being used by a number of governments. And a lot of time, this is basically for criticizing governments, how they handle the pandemic. Some of the most recent case, for example, in Jordan, when one cartoonist draw a cartoon of, rather than having the Black Lives Matters, with a police officer putting a knee on the neck of a man who's being laid down. But the man who put the knees on the other person happened to be the Prime Minister of Jordan. So that's the cartoon that addressed some issues that happened before in Jordan about how the Prime Minister and his policy does not respond to some. And when artists respond by expressing their view that way, by linking with Black Lives Matters, he's in trouble. He's received all kinds of threats, and at the end withdraw the cartoon from a Facebook page. So cases like that, when you started to see the increased level of intolerance that spread even more during the pandemic. So I think it's just good to see the pandemic and relationship with limited freedom of expression, not as an isolation event, but it's a continuation. It's a new context being built on the previous context of a situation that's being put in. I will respond maybe a little bit more on some of the challenges that we've seen, whether this is how the challenge around insulting head of states, which has been a classic case for silencing artists, hurting religious feelings when they do some piece of arts and being seen as insulting God, hurting other people's religious feelings, the challenge of censorship online in digital space when contents are being taken down, when they're seen as inappropriate. And that's when these social media companies set their own guidelines of what can be shown and what cannot be shown on their platform. So that's another online censorship that's been happening before the pandemic and getting worse also during the pandemic. And certainly all other types, the minority, our research show, for example, that this, especially last year, where artists are being charged on the ground of being terrorist related. And that's a growing number of over now 15% of the cases that we document has been charged on this. So that's cases like Turkey, when anyone associated with the Kurds, then are being associated as terrorist-related artists because they're being seen as related. But this is not only happening in those countries, also in America, when artists are being charged of being related or be a sympathizer for a terrorist act. And that's lead to 14 rappers in Spain being charged. And that makes Spain the country with the highest number of imprisonment of artists around the world. And that's before China and Iran, because of the attempt to also silence rappers. But we actually can look into this a little bit more and see how that would evolve during the time of the pandemic.
Right. Well, thank you, Montserrat and Julie. I mean, this is not only an eye-opener, but really concerning. But at the same time, there is a strong element of continued hope. As you say, Julie, you know, artists in all sorts of forms, but particularly musicians, I would say, because this is part of where we are and why we are here, you know, unite people. They are basically the ones who, you know, tie together societies, are not only around causes, but in terms of feelings, sentiments, and the sense of belonging, the sense of destiny. You know, they speak to the soul of their own people and to the soul of others around the world. And this is why it's so important that we're having this conversation today, because the extent to which artists, and particularly musicians, are being attacked and silenced. You know, one key or fundamental ingredient for a healthy civil society is being endangered, is being challenged. So your work is fantastic. On the other side, Lane, I mean, you are an artist. You have, well, you have, I know you first and better for Rain in Sahara, which is not only fantastic in terms of music quality, but also because it's hard hitting. Not only in the issues that you deal with, but in the power, the narrative power that you have in your videos and in the music. And both of them combined are stories that, you know, connect and anybody around the world, not without a good dose of dramatism and a good dose of, speaking truth to power. So how do you see the situation from your standpoint, and particularly where you are located?
Well, thank you for the very kind words. In terms of the COVID situation, I mean, I think here in India, the situation is the numbers are so huge, and we're desperately trying to contain the situation, just because there are huge numbers of people who don't even have access to basic hygiene. So in terms of hand washing and toilets and things of that nature. So there's a big fear that this could really spread out of control. So I'm not super familiar with a situation where there's an added lockdown. I know there's been some criticism around security elements of application in terms of tracking. And I think there's quite a lot of stuff happening on the technological side, perhaps more than perhaps the artistic side, because I mean, live music is a huge thing here in India, and going online, it just doesn't have the same kind of effect. I mean, when we play live and we engage our audiences, that's a very different thing. But I mean, taking it back to the pre-COVID situation, I mean, we definitely saw this this creeping in of using kind of colonial era laws, for example, that we used to try to control and muzzle Gandhi, starting to be used on journalists and other people who were being very critical of certain things. So I would say that as a result of that, personally, you know, within our group, we're definitely feeling the beginnings of self-censorship in terms of starting to be very careful about what we put out, in terms of, and especially when we perform live, because every single thing we say is going to be scrutinized and recorded, and we don't know what's going to happen with that. So being really careful on that front, deciding what are the battles that we really want to fight. So the way that we approach this is we try to keep it more generic, or we target on sort of more international. We try to make it more international that people from all over the world can relate to. So that's sort of from our perspective. But I think, you know, when we start looking at what's happening now with the COVID crisis and the police brutality protests, the Black Lives Matter protests that are erupting in the US, I mean, I don't think we can discount how global that has gone, because this goes much deeper. I think this goes much deeper to a system, an economic system that is just it's on the way out now. It's completely failed, and this has been exposed now. And so I think the art world now has a tremendous opportunity to really delve deeply into this issue and to connect, as you were saying, really connect with people globally about what's happening and how people can engage. You know, I think in terms of music, we still are at a very early stage in terms of how we can leverage the power of conscious music beyond this kind of Live Aid model. I think we've taken some probably good steps in the right direction with Global Citizen, but I mean, here in India, there was a huge problem where a lot of images went viral after the Global Citizen concert in Bombay, where around 70 to 80,000 people, Coldplay and some other artists were performing, and the venue was basically a complete mess after, and people were taking pledges to you know, focus on sustainability, cleanliness, cleaning up. Now that there could have been some issues around not having enough bins and things like that, but that was an image that a lot of people took away, that it may have not been fully invested as much as it could have been in terms of sustainability and engagement and activism sort of component. So, you know, I think there's great opportunities. In some ways, you know, when we look at how radically and quickly we changed our economic model, locking people down, that in some ways is giving us hope that we can also tackle the climate crisis in this way. And so, yeah, so I think that there's quite a lot of excitement, at least, you know, from our end, from some artists in our part of the world on what we can do. And this is tremendous material. I mean, it's been difficult to deal with some of these issues and to really grapple and work on them. From a mental health perspective, that definitely has been a challenge, and I think that could certainly be something that we can also work on, ensuring a support structure for artists who are really delving deeply into this. But yeah, no, I'm quite hopeful that out of this situation, some really powerful stuff's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. I mean, all of you have inherently mentioned, of course, the Black Lives Matter protests around the world. And from a singular event, it has propagated to a global event that is like a sign of, civil society at large having had enough of social injustice and perhaps more into the back of their minds for some, and for others it's in front in their daily lives, how authoritarianism and populism and the lack of or the rise of intolerance, as you said, Len, is creeping in slowly but steadily, and that now with the COVID is basically just going by the fast track. But Black Lives Matter is actually quite important thing to talk about in terms of how civil society are using it in the positive sense of the word to express a tremendous sense of frustration and anger that has been contained for quite some time. And that takes us to think that from all places, it actually started in USA. And it started during a period in which, the politics are getting extremely heated up, to say the least, because the elections are coming and the things that Trump and the current president has been doing are outrageous, to say the least. But it's not the only country that is so emblematic in kind of taking the wrong turn towards healthy societies. UK is also kind of resorting to that. Brazil has been mentioned as well. So many Western countries are basically being dragged to these negative phenomena. So back again to three of you. I mean, have you or could you tell us stories about artists that potentially before a couple of years ago they were living in Western societies where freedom of expression was, allow me to put it this way, almost take it for granted. Maybe it's Chirac or Julie, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think just definitely what you're saying resonate very well with the US, where it's the freedom of expression have shrank since the beginning of President Trump presidency. We have seen that right away. To be honest, right after inaugural, 3 weeks after late January 2017, President Trump, issue an executive order to ban 7 countries, like the immigration ban, and this immigration ban had a kind of tremendous effect on freedom of expression, but also on artistic freedom, and so this is the reality we're living, and we are seeing every day new acts and facts against freedom of expression, press freedom, protest rights, as we are seeing the Black Lives Matter movement raising in the US. I think what you were saying, like, yes, art is galvanizing and mobilizing force, and it's a way to unite people around a social movement. And art has already kind of played a crucial role in both the COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, especially following George Floyd's death. What we have seen in the US specifically is like street art, protest artwork as bonded. Songs have formed a rallying cry for protester. Artwork representing George Floyd and others killed by police have become emblems of struggle for racial justice. In all social movements, art takes this central and symbolic role of unifier and memorizer. And to also extend what Chirac was saying, on social media, we have seen also how it has been becoming a virtual, the virtual network during the pandemic and the Black Lives Movement. It has been like art has become a central way to capture the imagery and iconography of this crisis. And I think musicians have also recently released a lot of songs, to build community and applaud, you know, resilience and thanks, you know, essential worker around the world, from Alicia Keys to Bon Jovi to Bobby Wine, Mike Love. I think that's also kind of the importance of, you know, art and artists during this time of crisis. I think music is also extremely is becoming extremely dangerous to those in power, because it's inherent, I will say, ability to unite people. What we are seeing is like from the song of Kendrick Lamar or Right, which is becoming a chorus of the Black Lives Matter movement, to Pussy Riot's critique of Putin, to the group Yorum revolutionist song in Turkey that have been led them, you know, systematically attacked in jail. Songs are often the very backbone of social movement and calls for social change. I mean, like as protesters are marching in the US down the street, what do? They are singing. So I think that we can see also the positive aspect of art and artists kind of to push boundaries, to actually, you know, push those attacks and help, you know, the community to raise around it and not let it silence. Even, you know, we are seeing in major democracy, there's attacks from every front, you know, from our government and especially, you know, with this huge, you know, racial injustice that are spreading from, you know, police brutality in the US.
No, thanks so much, Julie. Back to Lane. I mean, you as an artist, I mean, could you tell us from your own experience, whether it is, you know, through Raining Sahara or other of your projects with colleagues of yours, I mean, the impact that you have had through your art? Could you kind of help us understand basically what does it mean for you to actually have an impact from your work and your expression?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's just a pleasure to be able to engage with audiences and to express what we're feeling. I mean, I think something that we've really seen erupt around the world now is that there's an anger. There's an anger that we know a lot of things are wrong, and the people who we are putting in power, or who are in some cases just accessing that power and leveraging it, are not doing the things that we know need to be done. So I think for us, we feel that a lot when we just talk about this openly, and when we use our music and visuals and lights and create this experience that people they really can connect to it. And, you know, I think this kind of economic system encourages isolation and encourages this thinking, constant questioning of maybe I'm not quite right about this. And I think now in this age of disinformation, that it can potentially expand it even more. You're not really sure what's going on, who to believe, what's a credible source, and so much mudding of the water. So I think for us, especially when we perform live, there's a very cathartic element of people all sort of experiencing, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy about thinking about these things. I am equally as angry as so many people here, and there is something that we can actually do. So in terms of impact, one of the things that we're really sort of still trying to figure out is how we can blend music, live performance with activism and technology. So engaging these people through music, but then continuing that engagement and interest in these issues through local movements such as Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion, for example. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot more that can be done on that front. And I think there'll probably be a lot of artists out there who can all work together and figure out some ways that we can develop this sort of architecture and technology and figure out ways to spread the messages that desperately need to be spread.
Right. So we're getting the sign that it's time to wrap up. Not too close yet, just to wrap up. I would like to just provide a message to our audience. First of all, saying that we are used as general civil society and general consumers of social media and some other kind of news that the bad guys are usually in the non-democratic countries, which are usually corrupt. And we should be very well aware that the trend is changing, and it's changing fast in a very dangerous way, that those countries that have been seen as the bastion of democracy and freedom and development are actually turning in the wrong direction, which is not to be taken lightly, because therefore that gives an excuse, and that gives a sort of a standpoint for other countries to follow suit and become just like them. And we have seen definitely that on one side we have artists, and you have seen our three guests, how they are explaining how this trend is increasing and getting worse because of the power of music and other forms of art, but also about how important they are for civil society, not only where they are, where they live, but also, in connection to create a global solidarity. We have another artist coming in through a video. He's called Naseman from Liberia, a great friend as well. I just want to say something about him very quickly, besides the fact that, we know each other for quite a long time. Lane knows him as well. They actually owe me a song, and hopefully one day they will finish. um, he created a video about 1 year ago called "Who Stole My Money?" that refers to an act of corruption in Liberia where something like, maybe I'm wrong about the figure, but I think it was $800 million were stolen from the central bank, and they were found later on the boxes from trailers, from lorries, and his song alone became basically the sentiment of the whole nation, and that he himself also kind of carried the consequences of being persecuted and nailed down. So to our friends in the audience, I mean, don't take for granted when people write songs and when they express through music social issues. Actually, the value is tremendous for everybody around the world. And, societies to be healthy, to be vibrant, to be connected to each other in this world where isolation is becoming stronger and stronger. I mean, this is the oxygen that we all need. And that is why it's so important to have had this conversation, so important to continue with Fête de la Musique, so important to focus for us on the fair play competition. And well, I don't know, maybe you can be very, very, very quickly, the three of you, want to give a closing message to the audience that is watching us. Very quickly, very quickly. Maybe Julia, you want to start very quickly.
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thank you to all of you for this conversation. I think I will finish just by saying, art is a powerful tool to change the world. Artists need, the support that they deserve and need to be protected when they are facing risks. So we should all unify to enable more resources for artists when they are persecuted. They should not pay from their life to actually voice out what we all think. So I really want to give a message of solidarity. We should stand all in solidarity for artists and protect them. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Chirag?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's so important for us to have a takeaway message after we discuss some of the challenges that we have heard, that we can always do something about it. So you all invite, whether you are an artist or just art lovers or appreciation of arts, to come to our website and join us as Artistic Freedom Defenders. We have a program where individual actions does matters when we collectively take action together. If you're an artist also, I invite you to join us as being an artist for artistic freedom. Whatever the country or themes you are in, write to us, go to our website, and then we can connect you with the Artist Network and those who think that it's important to stand up to defend our freedom of artistic expression at the time when situations are getting worse here. So I would love to invite everybody for that.
Thank you for that, Srirak. Last but not least, Lane.
Well, thank you, Roberto. Thanks to GMI and everybody for this really fascinating conversation this afternoon. As an artist, I think we're still at a very early stage of what we really can accomplish through change. And so I think, particularly amongst the conscious artists, I think it would be great to try to foster some more collaborations and cross-pollinate our audiences, because ultimately, at the end of the day, apparently, according to some research that has come out of Harvard, non-violent civil disobedience movements only need to get 3% of the population on board to create a radical change that's desperately needed. So that's not a terribly daunting number. I think it's very doable. And I think with this community, there are tremendous things that we can all accomplish together, and look forward to working on some ideas with all of you.
Thank you so much. And a particularly special message for the young people, those of you who are starting, your careers and to face life at large. Remember that the future is yours, and connect with us, connect with Srirak, with Julie, with Lane, and it's your future. Don't let it to be taken away from you. All right. So thank you very much to everybody. It was an honor, a pleasure, and hopefully we can see the video from Naseman now. Yeah. All right.
Yo, ladies and gentlemen, what up, man? I'm Nasi, man, a reggae dancehall artist from the motherland, West Africa, Liberia. I represent Transparency International, Fair Play Music, JMI International, and not forgetting Buck Studio. Yo, I was inspired with the song Justice to speak against corruption, social injustice, violence against women and children, police brutality, rape, and the list goes on. You see, in this world today, every minute and second that passes by, there's a crime being committed, and someone out there is crying for justice. Nowadays, we hear the cry for justice in every street and corners of our earth. So I wrote this song as an artistic cry for help and hope to empower the underprivileged, to empower the disenchanted population, and strengthen and encourage the young generation to stand up and speak truth to power, and also to encourage them to fight for equal rights and justice so that those corrupt-minded people can no longer trade on our dreams. This song is also the symbol of hope. It's a symbol of courage in our struggle, and which is the symbol of freedom for equal rights and justice. So as a voice of the voiceless and an activist, I will not refrain from speaking into any political or social issues that is battling my country or the world in general. One love from Nazi man. Big up. Respect.
Well, Master Lazy, when I bring you positive vibration from the street to the ghetto, yeah. I see the ghetto, you them cry day and night, asking, oh, no, why?
Master LC,
So let's see, I come and burn them down, I say. In the ghetto, them a backing loud. In the street, them a crying out. And tell me what are we fighting for? And tell me when is the love? In the ghetto, them a backing loud. In the street, them a crying out. And tell me what are we fighting for? And tell me where is the love? Fire come burn Babylon them down, cause they'll always want come suppress the whole people down. They make increase the prices, them suppress the masses. They never know some Rastafari around this town. Government them move down, yeah, just like cancer. It feels corruption in the people like cancer. System million get missing, no one knows the answer. Tell me what becomes of the children's future. Where is the life we're looking for? Where is the peace we have been searching for? My brother, come tell me. My sisters, come tell me. It's justice and equality, listen. In the ghetto, them are backing loud. In the street, them are crying out. And tell me what are we fighting for? And tell me when is the love? In the ghetto, ghetto, them are backing out. And the street, them are crying out. And tell me what are we fighting for? And tell me where is the love? Some pull people, them a suckle. No food to eat and there is no place to sleep. Cause you don't want school, no shoes on their feet. You talk shit, get brutalized, no freedom of sleep. My sisters get ripping, kill, no justice to speak. Can't assassin on the ghetto, our lands on the street. Them killing for peace, but the world will never cease. Cause there is no peace without love and unity. Yeah. I see the pains in the eyes of my people. Is there is a promise in tomorrow, yeah. But we never got back down to no slave master, I tell you, yeah. It's time to rise up for justice and equality. Like in the gutter, them are backing loud. Yeah. In the street, them are crying out. Yeah, tell me what are we fighting for? Tell me when is the love? Them are backing loud. In the street, them are crying out. And tell me what are we fighting for? And tell me where is the love? My people get brutalized and the system get terrorized. Tell me where are we going to? And the system prepare you. They got the soul in that jungle and they call for the World Crime Court. My people calling for justice. They need more food, more clothing and shelter. They need more peace and justice for the area. And more fire says, none blaze, more fire we are blaze. And justice for one, and justice for all mankind.